Hi everyone, it's Rain here. This is Healing with the Inner Tarot. In this series, I will be using this book, The Inner Tarot by Kate Van Horn, as my guide to a 78 episode healing journey that I'm happy to share with you. Thank you so much for being here. I always like to mention that I'm not a therapist. I'm a self-therapy enthusiast with some psychology education in my background. And I want you to keep in mind some of the issues that we discuss in this series might be triggers for you. So take care of yourself. And if you feel the need to seek professional help, please do so. There are a lot of resources out there. In the description below, I am going to be including a downloadable PDF workbook for you with some homework that you can do after watching today's show. Included in this workbook is a tarot spread I created called Help with Multitasking. So that's my gift to you. So let's get to it. Today we're talking about the Seven of Pentacles and how we can use this card in our healing journey. The Seven of Pentacles is about patience. It's about long-term vision, rewards, slow progression, and reflecting on a journey. If we look at the card, we see a man taking a break from his gardening work. He's leaning on his gardening tool and seems deep in thought. He seems tired as he looks at the growth of those seven pentacles. Maybe he's considering that it's not worth the effort. This is a reminder that challenges may need to be overcome in order to journey forward, that hard work is needed to reap a successful harvest. But if we look at the Seven of Pentacles in reverse, it could suggest that the rewards of your labor are not as significant as you thought they'd be. After thinking things over, you can decide to stop investing your time, money, or energy in a particular project that isn't paying off and decide where you should put your resources. I'm a gardener and I can attest that I have been the person in that card so often over the last few years. I used to have the energy to plant a full garden every spring. I'll show you some photos. I grew lots of tomatoes. Most of my garden was in containers. I had strawberries. I grew potatoes in old tires. I had lettuce. I loved my lettuce. I actually grew it in the winter too by the windowsill. I grew lots and lots of pumpkins. I loved my pumpkin patch so much. I still grow garlic every year, though this year I didn't. And I have asparagus that comes up every year as well. I even had a lemon tree. Look at that. I got 9 lemons one year, and I live in a northern climate, so that was really something. But since I moved to my new house about 4 years ago, I've been gardening less and less because the climate here is very different from where I used to live. I had a lot of those Seven of Pentacles moments where I just felt like it wasn't worth the effort. But in the end, I was definitely feeling that Seven of Pentacles in reverse. I pretty much gave up gardening over the last year and put my resources towards my fur family, my home, and my online projects. But after much thought, I kind of miss it, so I have a plan to be more balanced with everything. I plan to do a lot more gardening next spring. So if we go back to the Seven of Pentacles, this is how Kate describes it in her book. This card is our chance to keep plugging along or look elsewhere for the abundance we thought we were promised. To put it plainly, this card challenges us to weigh the pros and the cons, to consider the work and if it's worth it. Again, plug along or look elsewhere for your abundance. Now, Kate also says in her book, I always read this card as a chance to not only evaluate, but to redirect if needed. Remove emotion from the equation, as the practicality of the earth element is a better tool to rely on when making this judgment call. Your body can also be a compass. Ask if the level of exhaustion and tedious work you might be facing feels sustainable. I have another personal example of when I was feeling that Seven of Pentacles energy. During this past summer, I took some time away from social media. I have 4 YouTube channels. I have a website with a weekly blog post, and I have my educational projects, not to mention the home and the dogs and all that stuff. These things take up a lot of time. I love every moment of work, but it's a lot of work. I'm happy to say that one of my channels is monetized, and I'm very grateful for that income. It's about $40 a month that I'm getting right now from YouTube. And for me, that's nothing to sneeze at. But when I did the math of how much time I put in versus the monetary gain, I'm working for less than pennies, really. And with my fur family of 5 dogs and a cat, I weighed the pros and the cons. And at the time, the cons far outweighed the pros. So I stopped making videos and doing live streams for nearly 2 months. Of course, life happens. Everything is always changing and moving. The situation with the dogs got easier. The big house projects are behind me now. Well, until the next one pops up, right? But I found myself with a little more breathing room, a little more wiggle room. So I decided to plug along, as Kate says, to keep working at my business ventures and pursue my higher learning. As life goes on, things change, and I may need to reevaluate. But until then, my Seven of Pentacles moment is behind me. I know it takes hard work to succeed on YouTube, and I'm willing to make the effort now. Just like it takes hard work to grow your own food, I'm willing to do the hard work now. Whereas the past couple of years, I was like, oh, it's not worth it. I have to put too much time in. It's cheaper if I buy it at the grocery store. I am now ready to put the time in to grow my own food. Now, in her section on the Seven of Pentacles, Kate focuses on multitasking and how doing so can keep you in a rut. So that's what I'm going to focus on as well during this episode, because I think it's a very important subject that a lot of people think is good to have as a quality, but it really isn't. So why don't we just dive right into it? What is multitasking? Well, multitasking is working on multiple tasks simultaneously, as my dog settles. Multitasking is switching back and forth rapidly among tasks. And multitasking is performing multiple tasks in rapid succession. I have to say, just reading that definition causes me stress. I used to be a great multitasker, or so I thought. And as you can imagine, in the workplace, that's considered a good thing. That's considered a plus or a great quality to have. If you go to a job interview, a lot of the times you'll be asked, how well do you multitask? How well can you juggle many tasks at the same time? I was even the interviewer at some points in my life, and I asked those questions. Oh my God, I can't roll my eyes high enough, but I was hiring and I asked people those questions. So, is multitasking a good thing? Well, according to Psychology Today, the answer to this question is an overwhelming no. And there's an exclamation mark after that. The human mind is not wired to multitask. It is evolutionarily scripted for monotasking, one thing at a time. A 2013 study showed that people who think they are good at multitasking are actually not good at it. And if we think about the human brain, not being able to focus on one thing, more than one thing at a time, nobody's good at multitasking, right? So I have another little tidbit to share with you. The human brain can only focus on one thing and one thing only at a time. You can try to multitask, but research shows that it lowers productivity, increases errors, slows you down, can be perceived as disrespectful, distracts you, decreases the quality of the task itself, causes stress, and leads to burnout. Wow. That last paragraph that I just read described my work life to a T. At first, I was a very efficient multitasking machine, and I could handle any task at any time at any speed. But it eventually catches up to you. The stress leads to burnout, and that happened to me, and I know a lot of people that happened to as well. I've learned my lesson. So why is it that we cannot successfully multitask as humans? Well, there are 3 psychological categories that explain this. Now, the first one is evolution itself. Even though society has evolved quite quickly, our brains have not. They still operate as if we remain fighting for survival from predators. Now, to enable our survival, our brains direct all resources to one thing: detecting threats. You guys all know about the stress responses, the fight or flight, and sometimes the freeze and fawn responses to real or perceived threats. So our brains haven't evolved enough to focus on smelling the roses and appreciating the fragrance, while at the same time looking for that lion that wants to eat you. You may say, of course, oh, I can do that. I can smell the roses and keep my eye out for the lion, but according to neuroscience, you will not do it well. So the second psychological category is memory processing. When we try to focus on one task, our memory process comprises of working at the task, short-term memory, and long-term processing. When we're focusing on the task at hand, all three of these aspects are engaged. The brain is bringing up experiences, education, and knowledge to complete the task. So when you're in the thick of doing something, and you hear that little beep on your phone that you got a text message, it interrupts that brain process. Your short-term and current memory recall is just gone. You got distracted, and maybe you even stopped your task to read the text message. So now this memory process has to start all over again. It causes a lot of confusion, distraction, errors, and slower processing. I can say that this is very accurate, at least for me. When I'm working on my YouTube content, especially this show, I have to close my email tab on my computer, put my phone on flight mode, and make sure the dogs are all settled down, that they've been out for a walk, they've had a treat, they have their water, they're all relaxed now, so that I don't get distracted, so that I can concentrate. Otherwise, it really does get frustrating because I feel like I make mistakes, or I overlook things, or I fumble up my words and I have to stop the take and redo it. And I can't handle the distractions. So, you know, the memory process, it really is true. When you get interrupted, your memory process stops and you feel frustrated. I'm going to talk about that a little more after. So let's get back to our list. The third psychological category as to why we can't multitask is cognitive stress. Multitasking causes a stress-reactive response, and this degrades our cognitive processing even further. Now, for those who don't know, the word cognitive, as it relates to the brain, involves conscious intellectual activity like thinking, reasoning, and remembering. So cognitive processes decline as you feel stress. Now here's a bit of a brain function lesson for you. When you feel cognitive stress, your brain produces hormones such as dopamine and noradrenaline, among other hormones, and that causes the part of your brain that is responsive and logical to degrade. And this allows the part of your brain that processes emotions and fear to become centric. So instead of acting responsive and with logic, your amygdala, is that how you pronounce it? Amygdala? Starts your emotional responses up. This can lead to frustration. This can lead to further stress. It's a vicious cycle. Like I mentioned before, I get distracted while preparing my YouTube channels by the dogs, or, you know, if I don't have my phone on flight mode and stuff like that. I feel frustration. That's my amygdala starting to process and to become the focus and centric here. I don't feel logic. The part of my brain that was focusing before is starting to degrade, and the part that really just regulates emotions starts to become present. So it's really like a brain function thing that happens. It's a process in the brain that happens. It's not just that, okay, I'm multitasking, I feel stressed. It's something that happens in the brain. It's neurological. It's very, very interesting. And according to a study from Harvard Business Review, we asked students to do a series of activities with different types of candy. One group performed a variety of tasks with the candies. They evaluated the taste of the gummy bears, they named the jelly beans, and they organized the M&Ms by color. So they had the candies and they performed 3 tasks. Now, the other group only performed 1 task across the same candies. All they did was evaluate the taste of the gummy bears, jelly beans, and M&Ms. All of the participants had 15 minutes to work on the tasks, and afterwards, we, Harvard Business Review, measured how happy and productive they felt. The students who spent 15 minutes doing the same task felt more productive and happier than the students who spent the time on a variety of tasks. So multitasking can affect our overall happiness as well as other things, right? It gives us stress, but it also affects our happiness, which is interesting. I'm going to show you an image I found online. If you look at these 3 students, the first student is thinking about superheroes. The second is dreaming of being on the beach, that would be me. And the third student is focusing on the task at hand. Now just look at them. Who looks the most happy? This is just a fun little visual, but the reality is that when you multitask, your mind is wandering, and it can have some damaging effects. Now, what are the impacts of multitasking? There are some. The first, you can lose track of reality. You're not in the moment. You waste time. You make mistakes, and you have lower productivity. A perfect example is of people who text and drive. I hate people like that. They can cause a lot of harm to both themselves and others because they're distracted from driving. And I'm about to preach here. Don't think twice about this. Driving is a privilege, my friends, but most people think it's an entitlement. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Now, number 2, you may upset the people you love. If you're constantly checking your phone when your partner is opening up to you, that can really hurt your partner. Trust me, if you do it often enough, you might lose them. I remember going on a date a long, long time ago, and I was at a restaurant with this guy, and the first thing he did was he took out his phone and he plopped it right on the table. And I just sort of went, I had a cell phone too, but it was in my purse and it was off. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you going to leave that on the table?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Don't you think that's a little rude since we're on a date?" It was our first date. He said, "Well, I'm just expecting a really important phone call." So we're in the middle of ordering and his phone goes off. So he shoos the waiter away and I was mortified. He picks it up and he's talking so loud and he's talking to his buddy. This big important phone call, my friends, was him arranging to meet his buddy at a bar after our date. I was just like, is this for real? Like, this is really important to you? You're not focusing on the date and getting to know me? And at first, what went through my head was, okay, he's not interested in me. This is just kind of a ploy to get me uninterested in him or something like that. Because, you know, you see this in movies, like if you're on a date, okay, call me at this time. And if I say, "Oh, thanks for calling me, I forgot. Okay, I gotta go." It's because you want to get out of that date, right? This is in movies. I would never do that. But as you can imagine, I did not accept his offer for a second date, even though he asked me. That's not the type of person I want to be around, you know. It's not just multitasking, it's rude. Okay, back to the list. Another impact of multitasking is you cause yourself unneeded fear, illness, and stress. If you're multitasking, as mentioned previously, your emotional mind takes over. Frustration leads to stress, and stress is very unhealthy for the body, the mind, the emotions, the spirit. Just terrible. When you feel stress, you release hormones in your body that can really harm you, like the hormone cortisol. Chronic stress leads to overactive cortisol production that causes chronic illness, and we'll talk about cortisol in another episode. So, now that we know that multitasking affects us in bad ways and can hurt other people, how do we stop it? We live in an instant gratification society, don't we? I remember the days when I had to go to the library to do some research. Now I just have to look on the internet. Maybe I'm eating dinner while I'm working and the dogs are barking and I'm chatting with a friend on WhatsApp, and that just sounds so stressful as I say it, but how do I stop it? I can't be doing all this multitasking. It's not good for the body, the mind, the spirit, the soul, the emotions. So how do we stop multitasking? Well, There are 6 things you can do to stop multitasking. Number 1, acknowledge and accept that multitasking is not effective. When you find yourself feeling the need to do a bunch of things all at once, remind yourself that it's not healthy. It's damaging and it may cause you to be unhappy and sick. Well, number 2, focus on one task at a time. You have to prioritize and decide which task is the most important. Focus on it, complete it, and then move on to the next one. Number 3, schedule similar tasks together. For example, one day last week, I had to do a lot of things in the garden to prepare for the winter. I had my list and I switched from one similar task to the other. The reason I did this was to make sure I didn't hurt my back by doing the same repetitive motion for too long, because I had to move some cinder blocks and some heavy tires, and then I had to cut down the asparagus and I had to mow the lawn. So I switched between each one to make sure I didn't hurt myself, but I was very productive because these were similar tasks. And another example is one day a week I choose to answer comments and most of my emails. These are similar tasks and I don't feel stressed about it because they're similar and I do them sort of as one task. I focus on that. So that's what you can do, schedule similar tasks together. Another thing you can do is try to limit your distractions, like I do when I'm working. The phone is on flight mode, the email program is closed. This goes for relationships as well. If you're having a conversation with a loved one, don't be eyeing your phone or deciding to do dishes while they're trying to talk to you. There's a movie called Napoleon Dynamite, and I always remember this scene in Napoleon Dynamite. One of the brothers picks up the phone and he's trying to prepare his nachos and he's shredding his huge block of cheese. And his brother Napoleon is asking him to come pick him up because he doesn't feel well. And his brother is like, I'm kind of busy here. And he keeps looking at the pile of cheese while his brother's talking to him on the phone. Well, try to limit your distractions. It's a funny scene. If you know that movie, I think you're probably laughing along with me. So let's get back to the list. Number 5, set an example. I always tell my friends not to worry about responding to me right away when I send them messages and emails and all that. If I don't require immediate responses, this will teach me that I don't have to be that person who responds instantly. Everyone leads busy lives, and good friends will likely feel grateful that you don't require an immediate response. I know I do when people tell me that. And number 6, well, take care of yourself. Slow down. Nothing is that urgent. Do some breath work. Do something relaxing. Focus on one thing at a time and remember your health. Now, I don't want to trigger anyone here, but I'm sure a lot of us can remember that panicky feeling we get when we're overwhelmed with so many tasks that seem to need to get done all at the same time. Now, I know a few moms out there, and children do have a sense of urgency, and I get that. But generally speaking, we need to slow it down and prioritize and focus on one thing at a time if we can. Now, going back to Kate's book, The Inner Tarot, with every card, she has a section called How to Connect with the Card. For the Seven of Pentacles, she writes, stop multitasking. The Seven of Pentacles energy is redundant and routine, and the best way to understand the message of this card is to become fully present with it. Kate has some advice on how to further connect with this card. She says, another way to connect with the physicality of this card is through mindful and intentional movement. Mindful movement could mean going for a walk without a phone or doing your typical workout without music, honoring your breath. Move a little bit slower. Think through each step of your day and observe your thoughts as you go along. I love all of her ideas, and I think for me, the best way to practice mindful movement is through walking. I'm lucky enough to live in an area where I can walk without any distraction. Well, the biggest distraction I encounter is wildlife, which for me isn't really all that distracting. It's lovely to be walking alone in nature and on my land. It definitely keeps me in the moment, if I'm able to shut off my thoughts, that is. One thing that I always do as well is I make lists. I have a lot going on here, and I'm a creature of habit, so I like my routines. Every evening, I write out a list of things I want to do the next day. I have weekly and monthly lists as well. I prioritize them based on timing and importance, and as I complete each task, I cross it off. If it doesn't get done that day because it's a lower priority task, I move it to the next day. Now, Kate also has a second section for each card called Deeper Reflection. She suggests to do some journaling. Journal about 7 areas of your life where you carry responsibility. Then for each, write about if you're proud of these responsibilities, if they bring you a sense of fulfillment, and why or why not. Now, I decided to do this journaling exercise, and one of my biggest responsibilities is pet care. For a few months back in the spring, I was frustrated by it. I felt I was failing at it, and I knew the reasons. But instead of multitasking and trying to do everything all at once, I slowed down. I focused on one task at a time, one little bit of training at a time. And having done that, I really, really feel happier. I think my pets do too. When mama's happy, everyone's happy. I have a link in the description below to an article that you might find interesting. It's called Multitasking is a Myth, Understanding Your Brain's Limitations. You can find the link in the description below. And here are some general Seven of Pentacles journal prompts for you. And again, these will be in the downloadable PDF workbook that I have linked below as well. So here are the prompts. The first one is, are you satisfied with your progress? If not, what needs to change? How are you taking time to pause and reflect? How are you laying the groundwork for your next success? How are you taking care of your body? Now, I have a book called Trauma Healing Journal, and every week in this series I share a specific trauma healing journal prompt with you. This prompt is under the heading Healing Goals and Personal Growth. And here's the prompt. Consider the role of setting intentions and taking deliberate steps in your continued healing. I think when we're trying not to multitask, it's important not only to recognize that it's just unhealthy in every way, but to set an intention that we will focus on one thing at a time. Because if our minds are wandering everywhere and we're trying to complete too much at the same time, as mentioned before, our brains are stuck in stress mode, and we can't heal when we're stuck in stress mode. So taking deliberate steps to stop multitasking will benefit our healing journey. Now, I always like to pull a few oracle cards to emphasize the idea of, in this series, not multitasking. So these two cards come from the Whispers of Healing Oracle deck. I pulled the Choice and Modify cards. I think these two cards link together very well with the idea that we can make the choice to modify our belief that when we multitask, we are doing everything good. In the Choice card, a fairy blows these bubbles filled with possibilities, hopes, wishes, and dreams. You have so many choices in front of you, my friends, but maybe these bubbles could represent the tasks on your plate right now. You have to make the choice to choose which bubble to focus on and which to let fly away for now. And remember, each choice you make can take you either closer or further from what's good for you. So don't choose the multitasking bubble. So here in the Modify card, we see a beautiful maiden flying on the back of a Pegasus. There are birds and angels all around her. This card represents how your thinking influences your world. When you need to modify your behavior, it goes back to making choices. Your way of thinking influences you, and you have the choice to change your way of thinking. Release your fears about multitasking. Don't be afraid to slow things down. Don't be afraid to put a few things on the back burner. Don't be afraid to focus on one thing at a time. Now, for every episode, I also pull a card for the collective to kind of give us a general message with regards to the subject of this show. So today I pulled the gray card from the Secret Language of Color Oracle deck. The message is learn to scan your body. Gray areas in your body could represent stress and frustration and even fear. If you can sit quietly and pay attention to what your body is telling you, you might be able to identify when things are becoming too overwhelming. Now, I'm not a big believer in black and white thinking, but when it comes to the body, if there are gray areas, this could mean a blockage or even a disease of some sort. So let's pay attention to our bodies. As Kate says in her book, the body knows right from wrong. It knows when to stay and it knows when to go. So, what are the key points that we should think about today? Well, the first one is sometimes we need to take a break, step back, and assess our situation. Number 2, multitasking is an illusion. It's not a good thing. Number 3, humans do not have the brain power to successfully multitask. We're just not wired that way. Number 4, multitasking can cause harm to the brain, body, emotions, and mind as well, relationships, and productivity. Number 5, you can retrain yourself to focus on one task at a time. Number 6, making to-do lists can help you to organize and prioritize your tasks. Number 7, being mindful and journaling can also help you prioritize your tasks. So my friends, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope some of it resonated with you. Let me know in the comments what you think. I love your comments and I do reply to all of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and share this video or this whole series or my channel with anyone you think might enjoy it or benefit from it. So next week we'll be working with the 8 of Pentacles. So until then, my friends, I'm tapping my heart. I'm sending you lots of love. Take care. Have a great week. Bye.